Hey, good morning, Kensington. Thanks for joining us on the stream this morning. I'm Charlotte. And hey, by the way, if you're not watching on our Facebook group, you could join us there. That's where I watch, and we just kind of chat during the service. And then afterwards, we go live and do a hangout and just chat about the service and some things that are going on. So maybe I'll see you there. Few things that are happening I want to let you know about. First of all, baptisms. Next Saturday, we have arranged for an off-site baptism celebration at a local pool. And registration is open until tomorrow. So to find out more, go to kensingtonchurch.org/baptisms. Learn more about how to take advantage of this opportunity, because maybe it's time for you to make that public declaration of your faith. And if you have questions, you'll get all your questions answered there. Another thing I want to make sure you know about is that we are launching all of our winter groups right now. So if you would like to find out how to be connected into a group, go to kensingtonchurch.org/groups. You will find all kinds of open groups that you can check out and ask about. And also, you'll see an invitation there, because for today and next Sunday, the discipleship directors, myself, and the other campuses will be sitting on a Zoom call waiting for you to jump on. And we're there just to answer questions about groups, talk to you about what you might like, and make sure that you can navigate that website. So I hope that this season you find a group to connect to here at Kensington. All right, today we're going to get started with week 3 of The Last Arrow. So we're going to be hearing from Craig McGlasson. Thanks again for joining us.
Well, good morning, Kensington. If you've never been here before, my name is Matthias. I'm one of the worship pastors around here. Let's go ahead and stand as we worship Jesus this morning. Come on, we sing, you make the darkness. You make the darkness run and hide. You bring the broken back to life. Only you can, only you can. You set me free from every chain. You fill my heart with songs of praise. Only you can, only you can. Jesus, you're the only reason that I'm even breathing. I am wide awake. My heart beats only for your glory. My hands reach up for you to hold me. My soul sings, Father, you are holy. My feet dance to rhythm, to rhythm. Every beat is calling, every beat is calling out your name. You left the glory of your throne to bring this runaway back home. Only you can, only you can. You give me love, you give me life, you keep me dancing through the night. Only you can, only you can. Oh, my heart beats only for your glory. My Well, guys, thank you so much for coming to be here and worshiping with us this morning. Go ahead and have a seat and take a look at this video.
Hey Kensington, welcome to church. I'm Andrea Gibbs, the internship director here with my friend Nat Bergeron. She's an intern with guest services at Clinton Township.
What's up, Kensington? So happy to be with you all, watching online and in person. We're already in the third week in the last Arrow series, and we are praying that God will speak directly to your hearts today.
Absolutely. Today is all about that tendency to allow our past successes or shame define or limit our future.
Oh yes, we've all been there. But God calls us to follow him in a new future, regardless of our past.
Hey, speaking of a new future, you think we have any future interns watching today, Nat?
Oh, absolutely. I remember just a few short months ago when I was considering the internship program, and my friend Faith told me about how surrendering to God and his nudge completely transformed her life in 10 months.
I love that. That's how it all starts. Responding on that nudge and stepping into the next adventure of education, equipment, and empowerment. That's what happens in our Total Immersion 10-month internship. Both part-time and full-time internships offer leadership development, a hands-on approach to day-to-day operations, classroom instruction, and mentorship from staff. Natalie, other than the wonderful internship director that you get to work with, what's been the most valuable part of this experience for you so far?
Yeah, I would say the most valuable thing is how the Lord has really taken my passions for reaching our community and showed me creative and unique ways to actually live out those dreams and my passions.
Our program is ideal for young adults like Nat, career changers, and those preparing for ministry. Applications just opened up, so you can read more and apply today at kensingtonchurch.org/interns.
And if the internship program isn't for you, we have plenty of other opportunities for you to jump into community here at Kensington.
Courses and groups with both virtual and in-person offerings kick off this month. Explore your faith in Alpha, learn how to manage your money through Financial Peace University, get curious about the Bible and Bible basics, or strengthen your marriage in the marriage course.
The best part about these groups is meeting new people and finding a community of people who are on the same faith journey.
We truly believe that change happens in community. You can join a small group that meets virtually or in person. Just head to the website and filter through the options available. There's a group for everyone. Head to kensingtonchurch.org/groups to learn more.
All right, Andrea, I think it's time to get back to the rest of service. Today we're looking back at the life and legacy of a courageous hero who inspired millions of people to right a historical wrong.
Good morning, Orion. I feel like getting your mask off when you're wearing a mic needs to be added to the Olympics. Like, it's an event. Hey, I'm noticing a trend I want to point out real quick between first and second service here. First service, nobody sits up front. Second service, it gets pretty full. But first service, nobody sits up front. So I'm starting to make some assumptions here. Y'all were the bad kids in high school, weren't you? You never sat up front. That's the way bad kids were, the rowdy kids. So I'm getting to know the services a little bit better. So welcome, bad kids, rowdy kids. Glad you guys are here this morning. You glad to be here? That was a great opener, wasn't it? The band is just killer today. So this weekend, I'm going to make an assumption that you know that Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so one of the things that we did in honor of that and in celebration of that is we put together a video that we're going to share. But I really want to have a moment before we just roll into the video to just share my heart a little bit coming into a weekend like this, especially in the time frame that we find ourselves living right now. I don't think 10 years ago I would have thought twice about necessarily coming into this weekend and feeling weird about it. But I want to be honest with you that I think coming into Martin Luther King Day on Monday and this weekend and having a moment to acknowledge that, given particularly the climate that we find ourselves in right now of so much division and frustration, it makes me feel a personal tension, to be honest. On one hand, it makes me feel like, I think as a white guy, of course, on Martin Luther King weekend, you're gonna get up and talk about Martin Luther King. And it also makes me feel like, I think on the other hand, a tension that as I say a few things, that we have this weird thing that we have done with race and politics, that we've wrapped it all together, that it's hard to talk about things that are biblical without it seeming like it's political. And so I'm just bearing honest some of my tension even in a weekend like this and in a moment like this. I called my dad earlier, actually today, to be honest with you. I called him, I was up here on the stage just a little bit ago, and we were kind of going through rehearsal, and I was thinking about coming into some things I wanted to share with you, and I thought, it's silly that I had this thought only 25, 35 minutes ago. I thought, my dad lived through that, and I didn't. I wonder, I've never actually asked him what he thought of that moment and what he experienced. So I called him just a little bit ago. I was like, hey, Dad, totally random moment. Do you remember when MLK was shot and how you felt in that moment? Like, do you remember that? And he was 15 years old. And he said, yeah, I totally remember it. So my dad, he's a blind guy, grew up with his best friend from literally, I think, 5 years old till present day. These two are bad when you get them together. They're just so awesome. But his best friend is a blind guy as well, African-American guy whose name's Tony. He literally is like my older brother. Like, I've never known life without him in our family. And so my dad said when that day happened, his immediate thought was to call Tony. And he's like, I gotta call Tony and see how he's doing. And I didn't even know this. Maybe I knew it and I just forgot it, but my dad reminded me when we were talking earlier. He said when I was that age, when you would pick up the phone, like sometimes you would have to wait like 5 minutes to even get a dial tone. And he said, and then I got the dial tone finally, and the lines kept going dead. He said it took him about 15 to 20 minutes to actually get a hold of Tony on the other end. And he remembers one of his first thoughts in that whole moment was remembering the anxiety that he felt to get a hold of Tony and see how he was doing. Then there was, this is only a year after the riots in Detroit, and he was saying how one of the things he remembers is the fear that he felt that things were gonna happen in Detroit and all the rumor that it would, like things are gonna get bad again. Remember last year, the riots? Oh my gosh, Detroit's gonna go even crazier now. And there was this widespread fear that Detroit was just gonna turn into a war zone again. And so this withdrawal from wanting to have anything to do. My dad even had family that lived in the city, and they're like, we don't wanna go to the city to visit them. And I think it's interesting because I don't know that some of what he felt feels all too different than what we could easily feel today with some of the stuff that's going on around us. But I do love that when I talked to my dad, the first two things that he brought up is, number one, his commitment to his friend Tony, but then number two was honest about the fear that everything conjured up inside of him in that moment as well. And I just think as we come into a weekend like this, it's such a shame to me that someone like Martin Luther King and everything that he stood for particularly has become such a polarizing conversation. A man who loved Jesus, who served his church faithfully, who served his community passionately, who served this country to a biblical picture and end. We see it in Revelation. It's what Jesus is leading all of this to one day, that every nation, every tongue, every tribe is gathered around the throne of Jesus, worshiping him, singing glory, glory, glory to the Lamb. That's where we're going. That was a biblical picture and a biblical passion. And I just think that what he lived for, having become in so many ways today, both polarizing and political, is a shame because it was biblical. And so we do remember him. And I think it is beyond worthwhile to celebrate the life he lived, the legacy he left, what he lived for, and ultimately even the passion that he died for, which was the glory of Jesus Christ made known among the nations, and that we would represent the kingdom of God in its diversity and plurality coming around Jesus Christ. So we're gonna take a minute and watch a video to just remember the significance of who he was and what we're still fighting for.
The king dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in.
When you come to the point that you look in the face of every man and see deep down within him what religion calls the image of God, you begin to love him in spite of. No matter what he does, you see God's image there. I have a dream that one day everybody valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with.
I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I think it's pretty fitting the week we find ourselves in the series this morning, being this weekend, because the title of this morning is Choose Your Future. And I just think Martin Luther King was such a perfect example, a great example of somebody that chose a future he wanted to live for, that chose a future that was even worth dying for. So I hope that for you, if you've been a part of the series for the last couple of weeks, I hope that it has been food to your soul. I will tell you, in all honesty, it has been for me. Every series, especially as a speaker, is a little bit different. Sometimes I feel like whenever I open this book, it better be speaking to me. Whenever I'm going to teach it, it better be first teaching me. But there are some times that there are just certain series that do that more than others, probably just like for you, just like for me. And this is one of those that even though I'm communicating it, man, is it communicating to me and really challenging some things in my life, creating even good conversations between my wife, Nicole, and I, and honestly, even my kids. My son Tobin and I were driving here this morning, and even some of the conversations that we're having are pouring out of a lot of what we're talking about and what we've been through. So my hope for you is that this really has been feeding your soul, like I can just tell you it honestly has been for me. So the book that we're basing this loosely off of is written by a guy named Erwin McManus, wrote a book a number of years ago now called The Last Arrow. And I think the subtitle of his book is as much an explanation of this series as frankly it is to the book that he wrote. This was the subtitle on your screen. It's simply Save Nothing for the Next Life. Save nothing for the next life. And one of the things that I said on week 1 of the series is that one of the surest ways for us to derail our lives is to live for only this life. Because it puts this set of blinders on that all we live for is what this world offers, and we neglect the eternity that we have been made for, and then ultimately, so often, the eternal purposes that we have been made for. We looked at this passage in a book in the Bible in Ephesians where the author Paul once wrote to the church and called them to be a people who wake up, because there's this sort of evil that leads us on any given day into this sort of waking slumber where you're awake, you're doing stuff, but you're asleep in a sense, in a spiritual way. He said we can go through life asleep to the purposes of God, to the relationships that God formed us for. So as he writes to the church, he says, wake up and make the most of every opportunity that you have been made for. Because the truth is, there's a lot of us that get to the end of our lives and realize we wasted many of the opportunities that we were made for. Like, think about it. Nobody gets to the end of their life and the regret is, I didn't work a few more hours. Like, nobody lays there towards the end and thinks, I should have gone into the office more. Like, nobody gets to the end and wishes that their house would have been a few more square feet or their boat a few feet longer. Like, the things that we regret when we get to the end of our lives typically fall into 2 categories: relationships and impact. Like, the things that we regret are the relationships that maybe we never formed, or the ones that we never restored, or the relationships that we never invested in the way that we should have, or valued the way that we should have. Like, nobody gets to the end and is haunted by anything more than, honestly, your relationships and your impact, even impact. Like, when we get to the end of our lives, the haunting whisper that we have wasn't, did I climb the ladder high enough? It was more, did it matter that I was here? Did I make an impact? Which is why I think it's so powerful what Paul wrote at the start of this series, to wake up. So week 1, we looked at the call to wake up to the purposes that God has made us for. Last week, we looked at the call to wake up to the relationships that God has made us for. But today, so I'll just tell you, today is honestly, it is the simplest part of the whole series, but I think it's the most profound part. And that's so often the fact when you read through the scriptures, is that the things that are the most profound are often the most simple. So much of this book is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. And this is one of those parts of the series that is just going to be so simple. Some of you may even go, really, this is what I came to church for today? Is this message? This is so simple. We know this. And yet it's the simple things that we often neglect the most. And here's what today is going to all be about. This is what it all boils down to. No matter what plans God has for you, no matter what relationships he has for you, none of it matters unless you and I actually choose them. That's it. We have to choose the future that God has in store for us, because it will not just automatically happen. And if we don't choose it, many of us will miss it. So there's this prayer that we laid out on week 1, and we brought it back every week and have just asked that we find time and space throughout the week to pray this as a way to start to align our hearts. Ask God, like, genuinely, God, like, align my heart that I would be this person that lives for your purposes, that lives for the people, that lives for what you made me for. So I'm gonna put the verse up on the screen. I'm gonna ask you to do what we did last week. If you just stand with me for a minute, I want you to just say this out loud as a way to start the morning off, as a prayer together. And I get some of you, maybe you're here just investigating whether in the room or online. You're like, I'm not even sure there is a God or if Jesus is him. That's great. I'll say this a lot. We built this place for you. This community was created for you. And so if you're going, I don't know that I could say that, great, that's fine. But for those of us in the room that would say, yeah, I'm there, I've made this journey, and I can say this, and I would ask you to just say this out loud with me by way of request and prayer this morning. So here we go. Jesus, cultivate my heart to care about the things you care about and to let go of the things that you don't. Just stay up for 1 minute and let me pray. Father, I just kneel before you, the God of all creation, in whom you have told us heaven and earth derives its name. And so we come to you, all our names this morning that you know. And what an incredible thought. There's not a name in this room or watching online that you don't know. You know us by name. You know our stories. You know our fears. You know our hang-ups. You know our hopes and our dreams. You know what makes us smile. You know what makes us cry. And so you, who are the God of all creation, be present to us this morning, I pray. Speaking into our lives, speaking into this day, owning this room, owning all the rooms watching in all the different locations right now. Would you just own it in this way that is beautiful, that is visceral, and that is clear. And I pray that you would give us insight into your scriptures this morning and stories that are old but are as relevant and as meaningful for our lives today as they were relevant to the people that lived them when they walked with you. Thank you for your love for us. Thank you for your promises to us. In Jesus' name, amen. So before we go any further, I want to take a second, just as always, thank you all for your generosity and your giving. We're going to go ahead and take a minute and receive up our offering today. And just to let you know, I've said this a lot. I'll say it probably a lot more. Probably some of you get tired of hearing it. You'll say it in your head before I even say it sometimes because you hear it so much. These moments when we give as a community really isn't about money. I know that's the assumption a lot in church. They just got bills to pay. It's not about money for us. It's about mission. I can honestly say this, and I believe this about all of us here as a part of Kensington. If we had to sell the stuff that we have to pay for to keep doing the mission, we would, because the mission is what matters most. And my wife and I are committed to that mission. We were just yesterday, I kid you not, we were even talking as we were at Costco yesterday, which you want to talk about another Olympic sport, Costco on a Saturday. So we were at Costco yesterday and we were talking the whole time as we were walking and just navigating about our own giving and things that we're investing in this next year. So this is about mission and where our hearts are. And so I always want to remind us of that as we lay that out to Jesus. I want to thank you for it. If this is one of your first times coming back with us in person, we're not passing things these days, but you can still see on screen the ways to give in our app and our website, and simple there. And then we put stuff out in the back for those of you that like to drop in physical before you leave out the doors. So again, thank you. Mission, not money. So I'm just curious, have you ever noticed the amount of people talking about living for what matters that seem to go through life and before they even get to the end, like it's one thing to be at the end of your life and have regrets, but have you ever noticed the amount of people that even midway through life, long before the end, are already living with regrets? Are already living with a sense of missed opportunity and loss, with a sense of something being missing, haven't accomplished enough, haven't achieved what makes me feel like this is what I'm here for. Maybe some of you would go, check, yeah, that feels like me right now. And I was talking to somebody about this recently, and they said, oh yeah, like this person, and they started referencing all these people that they know that are basically not driven and just kind of lazy. I'm like, no, that's like the easy explanation. Like, it's not just undriven and unsuccessful people. Like I'm talking about even high-performing, high-achieving people that still have this sense as they go through life that something's missing, that they're not necessarily in this lane maybe that they were made for already long before the end, living with a sense of loss and regret and maybe missed opportunities. And I don't think in the church we're any different. Like we don't get a free pass just because we're religious or spiritual people. Like I know plenty of followers of Jesus that would still say, even if Jesus promises that he came to give us abundant life or life to its fullest, would still say that those promises seem to be eluding them. That's why I think it's so important that we talk this morning in the midst of a series like this about moving into all God has for us in our plans. It's so critical that we talk about the importance of choosing those plans. Because it doesn't matter how incredible God's plans are for you. If we don't choose them, we'll never experience them. Like, I don't know if you've ever just thought about the things in life that happen automatically. When I think about like your body is probably one of the best examples. Like think about all the things that with your body just automatically, unconsciously happen. You don't have to decide to make them happen. Like a couple of years ago, I started to develop this weird arrhythmia in my heart where it was just beating weird. Like nobody's hardly ever aware of their heartbeat. Like you don't ever think about your heart beating. You don't have to consciously make it beat. You're not even conscious of it beating most of the time. That was not the case a few years ago for me. Like I felt every beat. And sometimes they were crazy, like fast, then they'd be slow, then it'd be a beat and a stop. And I'm like, keep going, what are you doing? Then it'd beat again. So there's this one time I was with my family, we were watching one of the Star Wars movies that had just come out. We're sitting at the theater, and like all of a sudden I feel my heart just like, it was like it's playing drums or something. Bum, 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 bum. I'm like, what is happening? So I started getting like so fixated on the beat of my heart, like that it wasn't beating right, and then it was beating too fast, that I actually started thinking I was gonna control it. So I like started breathing weird, and I don't know if it was that I just started breathing weird, and I was stressing out, and I was over-focusing, but there was a point where like, I swear it stopped. And it was like, there was no beat, and then it just went, boom. And like, I lost my breath. It got weird. I'm like, what just happened? Like, I had to tell my wife, like, Nicole, something's not right. I had to go to the hospital. I spent like a day and a half there. I had to wear monitors for a couple of weeks. Thankfully, at the end, it was like nothing. It was benign. It was just some weird arrhythmia. Every now and then it happens, but my doctor says it's not a big deal until I fall over, I guess. But it was just this weird point where I'm like, thank goodness we don't have to think about and consciously choose to make our heart beat. Or other things like breathing. Could you imagine if you had to consciously choose your breaths in and out? Like, how weird would a conversation be then? Hi, how are you doing today? Like, you think my sermons are long now? Just wait, man. They go like 5 hours if I had to do that. Like, thankfully, we don't have to worry about breathing or eating. Like, we usually don't have to tell ourselves to eat. Your body tells you when you're hungry, when you have to eat. Like, do you ever just get tired of eating, though? You ever get tired of your body being like, it's time to eat? Anybody? No, there's the American dilemma right there. Like, that's our problem. But like we don't have to tell ourselves to eat. And so sometimes because I'm a diabetic, and so I have to be very intentional about what I do and I don't eat at times, and eating is just a chore. So I'm like, I can't eat this. I gotta make sure I got enough protein and blah, 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 blah. Did I take my medicine? It's just such a chore sometimes that I'm like, I hate eating. Stop telling me I'm hungry. And then sometimes I eat a meal and I'm like, I gotta do this again later today. And then if you ask my wife, Nicole, she says, you know what frustrates me is I always have to think about what you're gonna eat. Like, she says that's the worst, apparently. I'm like, I'll help you cook. She's like, great, cooking's not the hard part. It's having to always think about it. So I wish that somebody else would take that over. But there are so many things in our bodies that just automatically, subconsciously happen without us ever having to think about it. That if they didn't happen, what would die? Obvious question. What would die? I meant to say what would happen. I just gave you the punchline. We'd die, Craig. Yes, we would all die if it didn't happen. And sometimes I think that we have this relationship with the future where we think it's a lot like the automatic habits of our body. It just happens, especially in the church. I think especially sometimes like religious people, we can get super weird about the future. And we think that the future is just something that kind of mystically, magically, automatically happens. And so we just kind of sit and we wait with our hands open, and we just wait for God to kind of drop the future in our lap. And we tend to think that the future just happens, whether bad or good. If it's bad, I'm a victim. If it's good, it just happened. God just did this for me. It's his goodness and faithfulness to me. And we have this idea that the future just happens. But here's the thing, the future doesn't just happen. And I know we know this, but sometimes we don't act like it. And because the future doesn't just happen, the reality is some of us are on a track in life right now to miss everything God has in store for us. For one simple reason, we're not intentionally choosing the future God has for us. This next fall, my wife and I, Nicole, are gonna celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary, which is insane to think about, 25 years. But I'll never forget the day I asked her to marry me. Like, that will be visceral in my mind till the day I'm gone. So we'd been dating for about a year and decided, all right, I'm doing this. I'm gonna ask her to marry me. And so I went and picked out the ring on my own. I looked at several. I got some opinions from some other people, and I picked it out. So I got the ring. I'm holding it back. I'm waiting for the right day. I go into her job. When I picked the day that it was gonna be, I remember going into her place where she worked at the time and talking to her boss, and she was scheduled to work that day. So what I asked is that he would get her off the schedule, replace her with somebody else, but keep her physically on it so she would think she worked. Because when I came and I asked her that day, I wanted to have this moment where she's like, yes, assuming that's what she was gonna say. And then I'd tell her about the restaurant we were gonna go to, and then she'd be disappointed because she had to work. And then I'd be like, no, I'm awesome because I got you off work. So I got that all set up. I went and picked up 24 roses. And then here's where I went even above and beyond, which now I'm like, what was I thinking? We went to a Christian school at the time, and once a week we would have this chapel where everybody in the school came together for this big moment, and we would usually have guest speakers come in. The dean of students would set the whole thing up. So I went to him and I said, hey, listen, I got this idea. So Nicole and I are dating, you know that, and we had talked to him before, and I said, I want to ask her to marry me, and here's what I want your help with. Can I be the guest speaker that day? Like, can you say, like, there's this guest speaker, blah, 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 and then I'm going to come walking out, I'm going to have a dozen roses, and I'm going to get down on one knee, and I'm going to ask her to marry me in front of the whole room. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. And so I'll never forget, like, I came out, he's like, we have this guest speaker, and I come walking out, and everybody's like, oh, because they knew, because we were all friends, and they suspected. And I see Nicole, and she's sitting right on the aisle. And so I walked up to her, and I got down on my knee, and I will never forget panicking very briefly in that moment, thinking, oh, crap. What if she says no? and everybody's watching. So I remember like replaying in a split second enough scenes in my head of her and I having conversations that again made me confident that I'm pretty sure she's gonna say yes. And I'm like, will you marry? So I give this whole speech and I say, like, you're my best friend, I wanna die with you, blah, blah, blah. Everybody, the women are crying and the men are cheering. Actually, I don't think that's true, but that's how it was in my head. And I said, will you marry me? And then she paused. I was like, oh no. And then she said yes. And I was like, woo. I would just tell you, in that moment, she chose wisely. Some may not believe so. And so here's my question to us. Are we choosing wisely? Because every day God is putting opportunity in front of us to choose our future, to choose the future he has for us. And are we choosing wisely? So here's what I want to do. I want to spend the rest of our time looking at a passage in the Bible that's one of my favorite, and looking at one of my favorite people in the Bible, a guy named Peter. So if you have your Bibles, John chapter 21 is where we're going to go. Or if you use your iPhone, maybe get there ahead of me. But I'm going to say a few things, and then we'll get there so you can beat me. So John chapter 21. So Peter, if you don't know anything about Peter, I'll just tell you that in a lot of ways, for me personally, Peter is one of the people in the Bible I think most easily identify with. Like I look at Peter and I read his life and I watch his moments, and you've got this guy who is a passionate go-getter that goes often and gets it wrong as much as he gets it right. And I'm like, that sounds a little bit like me. I mean, Peter is, well, let me just say this. If you and I were developing a list of the 12 most likely people to walk alongside the God of creation on this planet, I can pretty much guarantee Peter would not have made our list. Like, he was volatile. He was temperamental. I wouldn't doubt that he had a foul mouth that matched his foul attitude at times. Peter, as a matter of fact, we have more recorded moments in the scriptures of him arguing with Jesus than any of the other disciples. We even see in more than one occasion that Peter wrestled with a certain level of racism in his own heart. Like Peter had some stuff that if we were picking that list would not have made that cut. And yet, on the other hand, Peter gave up everything to follow after Jesus. Everything. Walked away from his career, walked away from his status, walked away from his security, walked away from his family heritage, which is what he was a part of at that point. Like, he gave up everything to follow Jesus. It was Peter who became not just one of Jesus' disciples, but one of his 3 closest companions that walked this earth with him. It was Peter who was crucified because he refused to recant his faith in Jesus Christ, not just as Lord of creation, but resurrected Lord of creation. And not only was he crucified, but it was Peter that said, I'm not worthy to die in the same way as my Lord. Flip me upside down on the cross. It was Peter that wrote 2 books of the Bible. Peter who gave the first message after Jesus ascended back to heaven that essentially spawned the launch of the church. It was even Peter who ultimately became recognized by the other disciples as their sort of spokesman and leader. And so you have this guy that goes from fisherman to follower to disciple to martyr. And throughout the course of his life, it is marked by these significant moments of him choosing to follow Jesus. As Jesus says, follow me, come this way. These intentional moments of him specifically choosing to step into the future that Jesus had for him, to step into the life that Jesus had for him. But there's this one moment in his life where he actually made the opposite decision. In the midst of following Jesus, where Peter made a decision that threatened sending him into an entirely different future that ironically was sending him back into his past. Before we look at that, which is John 21, I want to show you one of the moments that really contrasts that to give you a sense of Peter and his bravado and his passion and his flair. It's a moment when he made probably his boldest statement and commitment ever to Jesus in the book of Matthew, chapter 26. You're going to have verse 35 on the screen, but I actually want to read for you verse 33. So it says this, Peter said, he's talking to Jesus, all the disciples are around, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. And you go down to the verse 35, Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same, which again is just, it gives you the dynamic of Peter. Not only his, I will die for you, but the fact that he's saying this in front of the other disciples, even if all those guys disown you, I'm not Jesus. You gotta, like, they had to at some points be like, Pete, what the heck, man? We'll die with him too, right? But that's Peter, always the first one to jump in and be like, I'm going to the cross with you. I will die with you. He didn't say cross. He didn't know cross at that point, but just, I will never disown you. I will even die with you. Now, here's the thing. If you know Peter's story and Jesus' story, then you know when it got to that point, And it was Jesus' most desperate hour. It also became his loneliest hour. Because in the garden where Jesus was arrested, that would end up leading to his trial and ultimately to his execution, all of the disciples abandoned Jesus. And then Peter not only was among them that abandoned him and ran and hid, Peter ups that ante. Because Peter was curious enough to want to see what was happening that he found himself at one point in the crowd that had gathered to watch the trial and ultimately the execution. In that crowd, on 3 separate occasions, Peter was recognized as having been one of Jesus' disciples. Hey, aren't you? I think you used to. And on all 3 occasions, Peter denied it. I don't even know that dude. Nope, don't know him. To the point that by the 3rd time, he actually gets intense about it. Like snaps back about it. He's angry now. I don't even know this guy. And completely doubles down on his disownment of Jesus. The guy who once said, I will go to the cross with you and I will die with you. This is not the moment that he chooses to pass over the future, though. This is it. John 21, if you're there. John 21, verse 1 says this. After Jesus had appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. So we're going to tell you how it happened, but let me just make a really quick note. This is going to be the 3rd time that Jesus will appear to his disciples after his resurrection. And what's really interesting is you do not get the sense, even though this will be the 3rd time, so 2 have already happened, there is no sense of a reassembling of the team yet. And some of you, I don't know if you even realize this yet, but Jesus didn't just come back from the grave and then go right up to heaven. There's well over a month that he spent actually wandering around, meeting with people, talking, teaching, seeing, visiting. And 2 of those times up to this point included his disciples, and yet there's no reassembly that's happened. And so this is what happens on that beach. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going fishing, Peter told them. And they said, well, we'll go with you. And so they went out and they got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early the next morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not recognize that it was Jesus. And he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. So he said, well, throw your nets on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. So I'm going to stop there. The rest of the passage goes on. Basically, there's a moment that they do recognize that it's Jesus. John in the boat actually says, that's Jesus. Peter steps up from the boat. Again, this is Peter's personality, dives into the lake, swims to shore. The rest of the disciples have to haul in a catch of over 150 fish at that point on their own. Then Peter goes back to the boat, helps them drag it onto the shore, and they have this moment with Jesus where they sit down and they eventually have breakfast, and then there's a conversation that Jesus and Peter end up having that we're going to get into in a minute. But here's what I find so fascinating about this moment is that Peter went backwards. He went back to what he had been accustomed to. He went back to fishing. And I think there are few things in life that will threaten us picking the wrong future more than a moment of mistake or failure. After Peter's 3 denials of Jesus, what he did is he went back to fishing. He went back to what was comfortable, what was familiar. And I think it's so important to note that he didn't go back to something shameful. He didn't go back to something bad, but he went back to something that for him was familiar. And I think in that moment, what Peter chose to do was to pick the familiarity of his past over the uncertainty of his future. I just did this and I don't know what to do now. So I'm going to go back to what I'm accustomed to. So I've been telling you a couple times throughout this series that I'm a hunter, love bow hunting. That's my go-to hunting. And I have a 3D target in my backyard that I shoot at all the time. And last year, I had this moment where, so I've probably shot hundreds of arrows into this target. Never missed until last year. So standing in my backyard, I'm at full draw, totally confident. And I don't know if I'd shot too much or I don't know if it was just a totally bad shot, probably just a totally bad shot. But I'm full draw and I let off my release and I could just feel my whole body shift way too much to the right. And I just blazed 2 feet past my target. I went right through my fence and it disappeared. And I panicked. Because at that close to the fence, I'm only about 25 yards away from my fence at that point, which means there was definitely enough power for it to go through my fence, across the neighbor's yard, and through his fence into the next yard. Now the next yard, that neighbor is always outside, I mean, relentlessly, religiously outside. You never see that guy anywhere but outside. And so my heart just dropped. And I'm like, in the moment, I'm like, do I go check or run in the house and hide like a kid under my bed? Like, I don't know what to do. So I paused for a minute. I literally had to catch my breath. You know those moments where like, brrr. So I go, I hop the fence next door. I'm looking everywhere. I can't find it. I'm trying to figure out based on the hole in the fence, like, did it go up? Did it go down? It looked like it went straight. So then I go across the neighbor's yard to the next fence, and I can't find a hole anywhere in that fence. So I'm thinking, but there's slots. So I'm like, what if it went through the slot? So I'm standing up on stuff in my neighbor's yard, looking into the next yard, trying to see the tip of my arrow. I can't find it anywhere. Long story short, I ended up finding it in the first yard. So it went through, and that arrow, when it hit the fence, it must have snapped right in half, and it just went straight down and buried itself in the ground. So I was like, whoo, because that neighbor's always at work. So I was fine in that neighbor, his yard. But I found that, I took that, I jumped back in, I took everything in the house. I swear to you, it took me weeks to get the courage to go back outside and shoot again. And here's the point of that. I think for Peter, this moment for him, this is his missed the target, broken arrow moment. Like, he messed up big. And what he allowed to happen in that moment of mess up and mistake is he allowed the shame of it and the whisper of the security in his past to pull him backwards instead of forward into the future Jesus had for him. So the next couple of minutes between Jesus and Peter, in all honesty, I think are some of the most powerful, beautiful moments recorded in all of Scripture. That I think are reflective of not just how God related to Peter, but how he longs to relate to us in these moments as well. So if you're still in John chapter 21, here we go, verse 15. When they had finished eating, remember I said they sat down for breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now that's an interesting question, and there's been for some time debate over what Jesus is talking about when he says more than these. And some people think he was talking about the other disciples. Do you love me more than these? I just don't think that's true. I don't think that fits the heart and the character of Jesus. As a matter of fact, there are actually clear examples in the Bible of times where the disciples are trying to posture up who's going to be better in the kingdom of heaven, who can be at your right side, and Jesus puts down that conversation. Like, he doesn't encourage their trying to trump one another and who's above the other person. So it seems weird now in this moment particularly that he would actually be fanning this flame. That seems more divisive than anything else. Do you love me more than those guys? So I don't think that's what it was. I don't think that do you love me more than these was a reference to who at all. I think it was a reference to what. Because remember, they were just out fishing. And the text that we didn't read through, if you read through the rest of the story in John, says that they pulled, I think it's 152 fish to shore. It was a big net, giant net, enough that it should have ripped, but it didn't rip. Kind of a moment of miracle. So on that shore is not just the disciples. There's this massive pile of fish. Fish that frankly represented for Peter his past, his success, a place of security and identity. And I think when Jesus said, Peter, do you love me more than these? I think that's what he's talking about. I think he was literally looking at this and saying, Pete, do you love me more than these? And here's the thing. There will always be a these for every one of us that whispers and draws us into a future different than Jesus has for us. For every one of us. The these will be different, but there's always a these. And sometimes the these will be a drawback to something shameful, to a habit, a behavior that you had once walked away from. But sometimes it will simply be a draw to a different future than what God has for you. I mean, think about it. Peter could have continued to be a fisherman. And that wasn't a shameful past. It wouldn't be a shameful future. He could have been a fisherman and been successful at it. He could have done it well and ended his days as a fisherman. He could have pulled these things out of the water to the benefit of his family and his community. He could have done this. And it wouldn't have been a wicked, shameful, broken future. But here's what it also wouldn't have been. The future Jesus had for him. And here's the reality for you and I, is that no matter what we do or frankly don't accomplish in this life, if it is not done underneath us stepping into the plans and the future and choosing the future Jesus has for us. I don't care what we accomplish in this life. If it's not the future he has, it will amount to nothing more than a smelly pile of fish in the end. That's what it becomes. And Jesus with Peter says, Peter, do you love me more than these? And I just wonder, to who of us listening today, Jesus is asking the same thing? Because some of us right now are choosing these over the future God has for us. So the passage continues to go on and the conversation continues to unfold. Peter responds to, do you love me more than these? And he says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, then take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hand and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And Jesus said such a thing to indicate the kind of death in which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him two of the most powerful words in the Bible. Say them, would you? Follow me. Follow me. You know what's interesting about the request to follow me? Destination unknown, but leader is clear, Jesus. And he says to Peter, if this is true, then Peter, follow me. And here's what's so fascinating to me. Jesus clearly had a future for Peter that he wanted for him. But up to this point, Peter hadn't chosen it. And this is literally a crossroads moment for Peter. He could have chose this. Now I'm gonna do this. This is good. I'm good at this. It's predictable. It provides. I'm comfortable here. I'm gonna choose this. Like, this is literally a moment where Peter has to choose the fish or the lambs, the future or the past, the life he'd been building for himself or the life that Jesus, the future that Jesus had been creating for him. This is a moment that he had to decide, what is it I'm gonna pick? His life, my life. Am I gonna go into the future he has for me or the future I've been making for myself? Here's what McManus says about the future. I love it. He says, tomorrow comes no matter what you do, but the future comes depending on what you choose. And this is that moment for Peter. It is this crossroads moment where he has to choose, which future am I gonna follow into? And here's the thing, Jesus is clear at the end. If you choose my future, it's not gonna be easy. You took care of yourself and made your own decisions when you were younger, but as you get closer to the end of your life, you're actually gonna be led to places you don't wanna go. Peter, if you choose my future, it won't be easy. But here's the promise of God. If you choose my future, it will be satisfying. It will be fulfilling. It will be meaningful. It will be what I, the author of creation, made you for. So Peter, what are you gonna choose? And I love that he asks him 3 times too. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? To the point that Peter starts to get annoyed. One of the obvious theories as to why he asked him 3 times over would be that Peter denied him 3 times. And so Jesus is like, hey, you deny me 3 times? I'm gonna ask you 3 times, maybe. I just wonder if part of it is also the fact that Peter was such a big talker, right? Like Peter's the guy who's just this chest pounding, like, you and me, die, forget them, even if they abandon. Like, he's just a big talker. And yet in the moment where push came to shove, he didn't let his confession of love turn into an application of effort. He just bailed and he ran. Like, Peter was this guy that used to use all kinds of big spiritual language, but when it all came down to it, I feel like his spiritual language just allowed him to hide his spiritual fear. And I just wonder if some of us do the same. Actually, I think many of us do the same. I know I've done the same at times. It's so easy to let our big spiritual language really just hide our spiritual fear. When we say things like, we're just gonna trust God, He's in control, we're just gonna trust what He's doing, but then we fail to step in and partner with what He's doing and participate with what He's doing. And instead, we just become people who it's so much easier to hide. I think there is just this prevalent idea so often that I hope we can undo today, that if God wants something to happen in your life, it's just gonna happen. Like, who taught us that? Because that's not in here. We see the opposite, as a matter of fact, so often. There's even a story in the New Testament where this guy comes to Jesus. Some of you will know it, the rich young ruler. The guy who was successful, who was very religious, comes to Jesus, asks him some questions about eternal life, ultimately about living more in line with God. Jesus gives him an answer that would lead him to be more open-handed with his heart, with his life, even with his stuff ultimately. And the guy walks away. He says, no. And what's most powerful to me about that passage is what's not in it. And it's not in it is Jesus chasing him down and go, whoa. Let me take back some of what I said to make it easier for you. Or hold on, let me re-explain it. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. Maybe I wasn't passionate enough. Maybe I wasn't compelling enough. Let me give you another chance to hear me out. Can we talk this through more? None of that's there. In the passage, he says, here's what it means. And the guy walked away. Jesus says, here's the future. And he chose the past. You and I have to choose the life God has for us. And there might be moments that for some of us, it's a mega choice. Like maybe even for some of you, there has been a stirring that you've felt for a while, a passion, a sense of indignation of something in this life that you just think is so wrong, needs to be addressed, or just an opportunity that's so missed and you just wish that you could do something about it. But then you quickly think about the resources that you don't know where they'd come from, or how would I provide for my family, or would anybody get behind this? I don't know if this is a dumb thing, or where would I even get started? So maybe for some of you, as you keep leaning into God, what is the future you have for me? There's a good chance that some of you might find that over the course of the next year, you have radical change in your life. Maybe new job, new profession, relocation. Like there are those moments. That's true for me. Like the only reason I'm standing here on this stage is because I felt like God brought me into a moment in the last couple of years. It was a crossroads where he said, hey, I have a different future. Which way are you stepping? And I hesitated for a moment, but when I knew, I stepped, and that's the reason I'm here today. And so some of you might find yourselves in a more of a mega moment of decision. But honestly, these decisions come on a daily basis. They're not just the big mega decisions. It's the moment where there is that draw back to the bottle that maybe you walked away from, or to do too much more, and you already said that tonight it's not going to be that many and I'm only going to have a limited amount. That's a moment that it's a decision to choose the future or the past. Or maybe it's a moment when you feel that drawn temptation to the computer at 2 a.m. to satisfy an urge that you know tomorrow you're going to regret again. That is a moment to choose the future over the past, to choose the future Jesus has for you. Or maybe it's a moment of conflict with your spouse and the choice to get frustrated and to bury that into resentment, to pull it out later, or to let it go and be gracious and forgiving and to fess up to your own stuff. That's a moment to choose the future or the past. And sometimes you might even say, well, but some of the things you just said past is actually my present, so it's not really my past. Here's the beautiful thing about Jesus. The Bible tells us that his mercies are new every morning, which means every day, the past has an opportunity to be gone. Every day, listen, the present has an opportunity to become the past. Every day, every day. For the follower of Jesus, the present is actually very short because Jesus says every day it can be new. Every day it can be new, which means every day we are faced with choices as to what we're choosing. And some of us are choosing the success of our past. Some of us are choosing the shame of our past. Some of us are just choosing something else, another future that will one day be no more than that pile of fish. And you will realize at the end, I missed the future I was made for. God had something different. Like, have you ever noticed evil doesn't wait for God's permission to create the future it wants? Hitler, Stalin, go through the list. They didn't sit back and wait for God to give them permission to create what they wanted to create. They just did it. And so often I see people that love Jesus, men and women that stand back and they look at the brokenness and the evil and the hurt and the wickedness of our world, and they go, why doesn't God do something? You ever thought that? You think that now? Do you look around our world now? Have you ever thought in the last couple of weeks, months, year? Like, why doesn't God do something? And sometimes I think God's looking back at you and I and going, I did! I made you! So you do something! You do something! And stop thinking that the future is just gonna happen, that I'm just gonna drop it in your lap. Until we begin to realize that we, in fact, are the agents of change that God has put here, nothing will change. When Jesus prayed, may your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, do you know who he intended to be the ones who would usher in the kingdom to this earth? You and me. And if we're just sitting back waiting for things to change, look at history. History bears itself out. There has always been loneliness, depression, poverty, oppression, wickedness, war. If we're just waiting for things to change around us or inside of us, it never will until we realize we are God's agents of change. But things will never change until we choose the future in the small moments and in the large moments that Jesus has for us. So one more time, I just want to pray on our behalf, because our hearts have to be aligned to choose the future to know it. The prayer we've been praying all series. Jesus, lead our hearts to care about the things that you care about and to let go of the things that you don't. In your name, amen.
Through waters uncharted, my soul will embark. I follow your voice straight into the dark. And if from the course you intend I depart, speak through the sails of my wandering heart. Like the wind, you'll guide, clear the skies before me, and I'll glide this open sea. Like the stars, your word will light my voyage and remind me where I've been and where I am going. Lost in the shallows of mist, fear, and fog. Your truth is a compass that points me back north. Jesus, my captain, my soul's trusted Lord. All my allegiance is rightfully yours. Like the wind, you'll guide, clear the skies before me, and I'll glide this open sea. Like the stars, your word will light my voyage and remind me where I've been and where I am going.
I love that line in that song, remind me where I'm going. Here's what I just want to do for a minute. I was just thinking about this during the week, getting ready for today. As we talk about stepping in to the future that God has for us, here's the possibility is that some of us, the choice we need to make isn't necessarily about the future Jesus has in the moment right now, it's Jesus. For some of you, the choice today needs to be Jesus. My question would be, have you even chosen Jesus yet? Let alone the future he has for you. Have you chosen Jesus? This is just an unbelievable story. That there is, first of all, a God over creation who with his mouth breathed everything into being. Let there be. And then at the end of all the stars and the planets and the animals in the sea, said, here will be the crown jewel of it all. You, that I will make man in my image, not to just disappear from him, but to know him, to walk with her, to love them, to be loved by them. Like, what a mind-boggling story that there is a God who wants to know us. Like, even this morning I was praying before I came here, and it just sometimes is overwhelming to me that at any point in the day, I can decide to get God's attention because he loves me that much. He loves you that much. So much that after he created you and we rebelled on him and lived our lives chasing this, he came to us to prove his love, to draw us back, to erase and to wipe out all the debt we had created between us and a perfect God and creator by dying for us and taking our place, taking our penalty. And the only thing he says, to step into relationship with him, listen, this is incredible. Choose it. Not jump through hoops, not give money, not make sure you've gone to church enough time. He just says, here it is. And the is me. And if you want me, all you have to do is choose me. If you want the life I have, choose me. If you want to be my son and daughter, just choose it. I'm offering it. So that would be my invitation to you. Choose it. If you haven't actually had a moment where you have decided in your own heart and mind, I choose Jesus, man, make today the day. You know, I don't really know how to do it. Well, there isn't a standard way. There's no specific prayer given in the Bible. There's no specific thing. The closest we might get is Romans that says if you believe in your heart that Jesus was raised from the dead and confess with your mouth that he is Lord, you will be saved. So I just want to give you a moment. If you go, yeah, I got lots of questions. I got lots of things I don't understand, but I can choose that. Then I want to give you a simple way to confess that to God with a prayer. So here's what I'm going to give you. I'm just going to give you a moment to say this with me. Maybe you say it out loud. Maybe you say it quietly to yourself. But if you're going, I've never chosen him. Today I want to choose him. Then here's how you do it. Just pray this with me right here, right now. Here we go. Dear Jesus, today I choose you. Amen. You're like, that's it? Any more words? I don't know, it might be. You could add more words, but that's really as simple as it gets. That's where it starts. There's going to be a lot more things that the two of you will talk about in time, but that's where it begins. Choosing him. Choosing him. We're going to sing a song now as we wrap it up this morning that is about what that choice commits us to and makes us assured of, which is all the promises of God are now yours.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant and faithful promises. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you say. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. When we sing, great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Oh, God from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Oh, great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
So as you walk out this morning, a couple quick things. One, I would say, if you chose Jesus, I would ask a few things. If you're here with us in the building and you made that decision today, would you just go back to our prayer room and let them know, just so they can celebrate that with you, encourage you, and maybe even share some opportunities for next steps for you to continue to move in that journey. If you're watching with us online, would you just let us know in the chat that you made that decision so that we can follow up with you and encourage you as well. I would also say, by way of some application and steps to continue to take in this series, we would love to see some of you make a move towards getting involved that maybe are wondering where's the place for you to connect. And we have some opportunities for you to do that. Two very clear opportunities. One is with our First Impressions team, and the other is with our K-Kids team. So you know that as we're starting to roll back into live services and more people are coming, we've got our kids that are launching off this morning, and we also have more need in that for more people to come and invest themselves into both the lives and the futures of those kids. So if you would like to take a step to get involved, just head on out to the hub and they can navigate you through that. And the last one would be baptism. This is the final week to sign up for baptism. So even if you made the decision for Jesus this morning for the first time, that's for you. And we would love to invite you to do that. So you can also get some questions answered at the hub. You can go online and you can go kensingtonchurch.org/baptism and you can sign up or get some of your questions answered there. But this is the last Sunday, the last weekend to do that, and just want to continue to encourage you. If you've not made that step, make that step. Praying that you guys have an incredible day, an incredible week, and that as God leads us this next week, because we'll find ourselves there into moments of crossroads, picking between his future or that we'll choose the future he has for us. See you next Sunday.
you.